Before we dive into today's intense story, a quick reminder. Over 90% of our viewers watch our videos but aren't subscribed. If you enjoy content like this, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And if you find this story gripping, don't forget to like the video. It really helps us out.
My name is Claire, and today I'm finally telling my story. The one I hid behind polite smiles and carefully arranged dinners. The one I buried deep under the image of a perfect wife in a perfect marriage. I'm 38 years old, and I've been married to Daniel for 15 years. 15 years I thought were built on trust, respect, and a love that could weather anything. I thought wrong. I used to believe that infidelity was something that happened to other people, careless people, neglectful people, women who let themselves go, or men who never really settled down. I judged them from afar, secure in my illusions, certain that Daniel would never do such a thing to me. We were best friends, lovers, partners in every decision, or so I told myself every time I felt that subtle shift in the air, that cold distance growing between us at night. Maybe I should have seen it sooner. The late nights at work, the sudden need for privacy with his phone, the way he started to look at me with eyes that seemed to search for someone else behind my face. But love makes you blind in the most convenient ways. I thought he was tired, stressed, worried about money, anything but unfaithful. The truth came to me on an ordinary Tuesday. I was doing laundry. How cliché is that? When I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. It was for a dinner at a restaurant we'd always said was too expensive to waste money on. My first thought was that he'd planned a surprise for us. Maybe an anniversary I'd forgotten. Maybe a quiet gesture to rekindle what we'd lost. I almost laughed at my own naivete. I wish I could say I confronted him right away, but the reality is that I clung to that shred of hope for days. I told myself there had to be an explanation. I waited for him to come clean, to look at me the way he used to, and confess some innocent secret. But instead, he kept lying, kept pretending, kept kissing me goodnight with lips that smelled faintly of someone else's perfume. So, I did what I had never done before. I spied on my husband. I read his messages while he slept. I followed him once, my hands trembling so badly I could hardly hold the steering wheel. I parked across the street from a cheap hotel, the kind with flickering neon lights, and watched him meet her, a woman who looked like everything I wasn't. Younger, thinner, careless with her laugh as she threw her arms around his neck. I sat in my car for 2 hours, not crying, not screaming, just staring at the truth unraveling everything I'd built my life around.
I didn't confront him that night.
I didn't burst through the hotel lobby like a madwoman. I went home, made dinner, smiled when he came in smelling like cheap soap and lies. I kissed him back when he leaned in. I tucked away my rage like a secret gift I was saving for the right moment. I wasn't going to scream, or beg, or fight for a man who was already gone. I was going to do something better. In the days that followed, I watched him more carefully than ever. Every lie he told me was a piece of the puzzle I needed. I tracked his meetings, his excuses, his stories that never quite lined up. I collected everything: hotel bookings, messages, little receipts, and notes she'd left in his car. I built my own secret file, while he thought he was so clever covering his tracks. And while I watched him, I thought about what I wanted. Revenge, yes, but not the petty kind that burns quick and dies out. I wanted him to lose what he loved most: control. Daniel always prided himself on being the man who had it all together: the respectable husband, the promising promotion, the house with the trimmed lawn, the friends who envied our perfect life. I wanted to rip that mask from his smug face and watch him crumble under the weight of his own deceit. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother, not my sister, not my best friend. I smiled at our neighbors and played my role to perfection. Behind closed doors, I planned. I opened a secret bank account and started siphoning small amounts of money from our joint savings. Nothing noticeable at first, just enough to build my own safety net. I made copies of our mortgage papers, our investments, everything that bound us together financially. I read every clause, every loophole. I learned how to untangle myself from him without him ever seeing it coming. Some nights, I lay awake beside him, listening to his steady breathing, wondering if he dreamed of her while I lay there, plotting. I thought about telling him sometimes, just to see the fear in his eyes, but I knew that patience would make the sting sharper in the end. I wanted him to believe he was safe, right up until he wasn't. There was one thing left, though, her. The woman who thought she could slip into my life and take what was mine. I didn't hate her as much as I hated him, but I needed her to feel it too. So I found her name, her address, her workplace. I learned she had dreams, ambitions she whispered to him in the dark, probably the same way I once did. She wanted him to leave me. She wanted my house, my life, my future. She wouldn't get it. One evening, while Daniel was working late, I stood outside her apartment building and watched her through the window. She looked so ordinary up close, not the seductive fantasy I'd built in my mind. I almost pitied her. Almost. But pity was not what I needed. I needed her to understand that she wasn't the one in control either. So I waited. I waited until I knew exactly how to pull the rug out from under both of them. The plan was simple: destroy the illusion they'd built together without dirtying my own hands. I wanted them to destroy each other, to see how quickly lust turns to blame when the truth gets too heavy to bear. The night before I put everything in motion, I sat across from Daniel at our kitchen table, watching him scroll through his phone while I stirred my tea. He looked tired, older than I remembered. I wondered if he ever looked at me and felt even a shred of guilt. If he did, it wasn't enough to stop him. And that was fine. His carelessness was my greatest weapon. I went to bed that night with a calm I hadn't felt in months. I knew that by the time I was done, neither of them would ever look at love the same way again. And for the first time since I found that receipt, I fell asleep with a smile on my face. This is just the beginning of what I did, and I'm not ashamed to say that every step was worth it. I wasn't going to be the woman who was pitied, who was whispered about at dinner parties while he played the grieving husband who'd made a mistake. I was going to be the woman who took back everything and made him wish he'd never underestimated me. If you're wondering how I did it, how I turned his betrayal into my power, then you'll have to listen carefully. Because the next part is where my real revenge began. Quiet, calculated, and so much sweeter than any screaming match or thrown glass could ever be. I woke up the next morning with a calm resolve that felt almost foreign to me. I got out of bed before Daniel did, made coffee, packed his lunch the way I always did. I kissed his cheek when he left for work, and when the door closed behind him, I locked it and leaned against it for a long moment, just listening to the silence of my house. My house. Not his. Not hers.
Mine.
I called in sick to work that day. I didn't want anyone to see me, not yet. I needed the hours alone, uninterrupted. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, a notebook, and the folder of evidence I'd been building. It felt like planning a funeral. In a way, the funeral of my marriage, the burial of every lie he'd told me.
I started with the bank accounts.
Small transfers at first had built up over weeks into a comfortable sum. Not enough to ruin him financially, but enough for me to stand on my own if things got ugly. I closed our joint credit card, claiming there had been fraudulent charges. I opened a new one in my name only, with a different bank. I left no traces for him to find easily. Next came the documentation. I made digital copies of everything: his pay stubs, our tax returns, the mortgage agreement, the deeds, the investments. I organized them in a neat file, printed backups, and hid them at my sister's house, though I never told her why. I rehearsed what I'd say if she asked. She didn't. Then I drafted an email to his boss. I didn't send it yet, I'm not reckless. But I had it ready, with attachments he'd never see coming. Screenshots of him using company money to pay for hotel rooms and expensive dinners. Copies of timesheets that didn't match his whereabouts. I knew his company had a zero-tolerance policy for misconduct. It wasn't about the money, it was about the lie. Daniel was so smug about his promotion. I wanted to watch him lose it. But I wasn't finished with her, either. The woman who thought she'd won. I had her work email too. She was trying to move up in her office, bragging to Daniel about a big opportunity she'd soon get. I drafted another email, polite, factual, attached with a few photos I'd taken of them outside the hotel. just enough to raise questions about her character. I didn't want her fired, that would be too quick. I wanted her reputation cracked just enough to make her fight for scraps the way I'd once fought for my marriage. I didn't want a scandal that splashed my name all over town. I wanted whispers, suspicions, the kind that spread behind closed doors and leave stains no one can wash off. By the end of that day, I had my plan ready. All that was left was the timing. I knew I'd only have one shot to pull every string at once. If I did it too soon, he'd wiggle out of it, smooth talk his way back to respectability. If I waited too long, my courage might fail. So I gave myself 2 weeks. 2 weeks to watch them both, gather every last detail, and make him believe I was the same devoted wife I'd always been. We hosted a dinner for his colleagues, all of them laughing at his jokes, praising his dedication. I stood by his side, pouring wine, smiling like a fool, when inside I wanted to smash every glass on the table. But I didn't. Patience was my sharpest weapon. One night, I sat on our bed while he showered and scrolled through his phone. There was a message from her. She missed him.
She wanted him to leave me.
She wanted him to promise he'd tell me soon. He replied that he just needed more time, that I was fragile, that I'd fall apart if he left me. I laughed, an actual laugh that slipped out before I could stop it. Fragile. That word used to fit me so well, but not anymore. I started dropping tiny hints to Daniel after that, just to watch him squirm. I'd say, "You work so hard, darling. I hope you're not hiding anything from me," with a sweet smile. I'd ask casually, "Is there something you want to tell me?" while folding his shirts. He'd flinch every time, then recover, kiss my forehead, and lie straight to my face. It almost made me respect him, almost. 2 days before I set everything in motion, I called my lawyer. Not the one we'd used to buy the house, a new one, discreet, recommended by a friend who'd gone through her own messy divorce. I gave him everything, the receipts, the photos, the messages. He laid out my options: alimony, division of assets, a case for infidelity that would leave him little to stand on. I listened carefully, taking notes, nodding as he spoke. I didn't cry once. The night before it all went down, I cooked Daniel's favorite meal. He sat across from me, raving about his day, oblivious to the storm about to hit him. I watched him, really watched him, and wondered how many times I'd missed the truth behind that charming smile. Asked him if he loved me. He said, "Of course I do, Claire. Why would you even ask that?" I almost laughed again. I almost thanked him for giving me exactly what I needed. The final lie, spoken so easily it made my stomach turn. After dinner, I lay beside him in bed, his arm draped over my waist. I stared at the ceiling and counted my breaths, steady and calm. The next morning, I woke up before him, like always. I showered, dressed, packed his lunch, and tucked a folded note inside. "We need to talk tonight." He'd think I was going to beg. That was fine.
Let him think that.
Let him believe he still had the upper hand. As soon as he left for work, I hit send. All the emails I'd prepared for weeks. One to his boss. One to hers. One to the lawyer with copies of every proof. Then I locked the door, poured myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window watching the street outside. I imagined a moment they'd both get the news. The panic, the excuses, the frantic calls that would go unanswered. When my phone rang an hour later, Daniel's name flashing across the screen, I didn't pick up. I let it ring until it stopped. I looked at my reflection in the window. My face calm, eyes steady. By that evening, he'd know. She'd know. They'd both realized that the woman they thought would crumble was the one holding the strings all along. And that night, when he finally came home, pale and desperate and ready to spin his last web of lies, I'd be waiting, not to fight for him, but to finish what I'd started. This was my revenge, not in screaming or breaking things, but in taking back my life piece by piece while he watched it slip through his fingers. And as I waited for the sound of his key in the door, I felt no fear, no regret, only power. The kind he never imagined I could hold. When Daniel finally walked through the door that night, he looked like a man who'd been hit by a truck made of his own mistakes. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie hanging loose, his eyes darting around the hallway like he half expected to find someone else standing there to witness his shame. But it was just me, Claire, the wife he'd underestimated. "Claire, we need to talk," he started, his voice cracking like he was the victim in all this. I almost laughed at that. I didn't move from my place at the dining table. I had said it just like I always did, 2 plates, 2 wine glasses, candles lit. The illusion of normalcy, the final act in a play he didn't know he'd lost. "Sit," I said calmly. He obeyed, not because he wanted to, but because he could see in my eyes that I wasn't the same woman he'd lied to for months. I think part of him still hoped he could fix this. Sweet, stupid Daniel. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "Don't insult me by pretending," I said. "I know everything, Daniel. The hotels. The dinners. Her." His jaw twitched. "Claire, please, it's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think." I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands in my lap, and looked at him like he was a puzzle I'd already solved. "You think I didn't see the receipt? The messages? Do you think I didn't follow you?" His face went pale. He started to reach for my hand, but I pulled it away before he could touch me. "You're not sorry," I said quietly. "You're just sorry you got caught." He swallowed hard. "I can fix this. I'll end it. I'll do whatever you want." I almost laughed at that. "End it? Daniel, I already did." His brow furrowed. He didn't understand, not yet. I watched him struggle to piece it together, the way a man who's always been in control can't believe someone outplayed him. "You should check your email," I said. "Or maybe your phone. I'm sure it's blowing up by now." He stared at me for a heartbeat, then snatched his phone from his pocket. I watched his eyes flick across the screen as the messages popped up one after another, from his boss, his coworkers, maybe even her. His hands started to shake. What did you do?" he whispered. "I told the truth," I said simply. "To your boss." "To her boss." "To my lawyer."
I sent them everything.
"Every lie you told. Every dollar you spent. Every hour you said you were working late." His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You ruined me." "No, Daniel," I said, my voice calm. "You ruined you. I just refuse to cover for you anymore." He slumped back in his chair like the weight of it finally landed on his shoulders. I almost pitied him, almost. But then I thought about all those nights I lay awake wondering what was wrong with me, wondering why I wasn't enough, wondering how I'd failed to keep him happy. And the pity vanished. "You'll never get away with this," he said suddenly, grasping at straws. "I'll fight you in court. I'll ruin you too." "You won't." I cut in, my voice steady. "You don't have the money. I moved it. The lawyer has everything. You'll sign the divorce papers, you'll leave this house, and you'll watch every single person who ever admired you realize exactly who you really are." He stared at me, eyes wide, mouth trembling like he wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. In that moment, I realized how small he really was, how fragile a liar becomes when the truth stands tall in front of him. "And her?" he asked, voice barely a whisper. "What about her?" I shrugged. "She'll survive, I suppose. But not the way she hoped. She won't get your promises. She won't get my house. She'll get to explain those photos to her boss, though. Good luck with that." Silence settled over the room. He looked around like he was seeing our home for the first time. The framed wedding photo on the shelf, the table we picked together, the curtains I sewed by hand. All of it slipping away from him because he thought I'd always be too weak to stand up for myself. I stood up first. I picked up my glass of wine, took a slow sip, and then looked him in the eye. "You should pack a bag tonight," I said. "I'll stay with my sister for a few days. When I come back, I want you gone." He didn't move.
Didn't speak.
Just sat there, broken. I walked past him, feeling lighter than I had in years. I paused at the doorway, turned back, and said the last words I ever needed him to hear. "I loved you once, Daniel, but I love myself more now." Then I left him sitting there, a man who thought he could take everything from me and walk away clean. A man who never imagined that the quiet wife with the polite smile would be the one to bring him down without ever raising her voice. When I stepped outside, the night air felt cold and sharp in my lungs. I stood on the porch for a moment, listening to the hum of the street, the distant laughter from a neighbor's house. Life was moving on, and so was I. I didn't look back when I closed the door behind me. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what I'd left behind, and exactly what I'd taken back. My freedom, my power, myself. I walked down the steps and into my future, not as Daniel's wife, not as the woman he betrayed, but as Claire. The woman who ended the story on her own terms. And this time, I was the only one writing the ending.